Well, folks, today we are trying something new. No, really, today we are trying something new. I am going to make something I have never attempted to make before. So this could go one of two ways: incredibly great or incredibly bad. Either way, we're gonna give it a try. Not only is the recipe I'm working on today something I've never made before, it's also something I've never eaten before. So I'm truly flying blind here. I have no way to tell if I'm doing it right or not. I'm sure some of you are wondering, Darby, why are you making a recipe you've never made before for something you've never even eaten before? And I'll tell you, today I am baking for someone I love, which is my favorite way to bake anything. This recipe today is for my granny. The cake we're making today is called a bienenstich cake. It's actually a traditional German dessert, and it's called bienenstich or bienenstich, depending on pronunciation. I'm not German, please don't come for me. And I'll put the traditional German spelling somewhere on the screen. I pride myself on being someone who remembers the little things when people tell them to me. The small details, the stories, all of the memories, and I keep them locked away, and that's what makes me a good gift giver, because I can call back on the small details, something you might not have even remembered that you told me. That's kind of where this recipe comes from, because my grandmother talks about this German bakery that used to exist and all of the delicious things she used to have from there. And I once asked her what her favorite was, and she said bienenstich cake. So I have for ages thought about making this, and I decided today was the day. I went to the store and got all the ingredients. I scoured the internet and compared recipes. I will link the recipe I'm using below. It's from the International Desserts blog. Without further ado, let's give it a shot. Let's try to make a traditional German bienenstich cake. This cake is actually a yeasted cake, which I have never attempted before, but I understand it's something that's big in European and especially German cultures. So it'll be interesting to try my first yeasted cake as well as my first bienenstich cake. We are starting off with 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I would suggest sifting yours or doing what I do and buying the pre-sifted flour. We're also adding 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. That is the only sugar in the entire dough for the cake. I think this is intentionally done because the fillings and topping for this cake are so sweet that they're trying to balance it out a little bit. I'm also adding in a packet of instant yeast. They do suggest you use the instant in the recipe. And this is about 2 teaspoons. That is all of our dry ingredients for the cake. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give this a quick little mix around. Make sure everything's evenly incorporated. For your wet ingredients, we're gonna add 1 egg, 1/4 cup of melted butter, and 1/3 cup of milk. And then the recipe specifies that you mix with a wooden spoon. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. Once all your flour is incorporated, you're gonna go ahead and knead it just a few times in the bowl to form a smooth, soft ball. And then we're gonna cover this with a towel and let it rest for 30 minutes while we make the filling and our topping. Alrighty. I think that's as smooth and as soft of a ball as we're gonna get. Cover it with a towel and let it rest someplace warm for 30 minutes. While our dough is resting, we're gonna work on the topping that you bake onto the cake. And this, looking at the recipe, has to be super sweet, which is why I guess the dough itself isn't all that sweet. We're gonna start with a stick of butter, 6 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of honey. We're gonna heat this on the stove until all the butter has melted. Then we're gonna add in our heavy whipping cream, wait for all of the sugar to dissolve, and then we're gonna take the whole thing off the heat and add vanilla extract and sliced almonds. Now I don't have a fancy burner in the middle of my island, so I'm gonna have to do some of this cooking back here, and there's not really a good place for me to place the camera. So you're gonna see a shot of like this, of me stirring, and then I'll be right back, okay? All right, I'm back and we're ready to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Who are we kidding? I'm not gonna measure that. You measure vanilla with your heart no matter what the recipe says. I'm gonna give that a little stir in, and then we're gonna add 3/4 cup of sliced almonds. We're gonna move this to the side for just a second so we can get our dough ready to go in the oven. Okay, our dough is ready. It hasn't risen much, but it's not supposed to. We're gonna take the dough out of the bowl and transfer it into the pan we're gonna bake it in. The recipe says to use parchment paper. I used Crisco and flour because that's how my granny taught me to do it, and this recipe's for her, so I wanna keep it as close to how I think she would make it if she made it as possible. It's definitely just like a little bread dough, and we're just gonna spread it out as evenly as we can all across this pan. All right, dough's in. I think it's pretty even. And the recipe says to just poke it a couple times with a fork. This is so it doesn't rise too much while it bakes. Because for this cake, you basically want a little bit of cake, a lot of bit of filling, little bit of cake. Which I respect. Now we're gonna go ahead and pour our almond topping straight over the top of this and then put it in the oven. It feels weird to be throwing such a wet topping over top of a dough. But again, I'm flying blind here. I'm gonna listen to the recipe even though it's not in my nature. Alrighty, she's spread evenly. I'm not gonna show you because it's all gonna tip out the side if I do. But this is ready to go in the oven. We're going in for 25 minutes where we'll check it first, and then it may or may not need 5 extra minutes, and we're baking at 350. Please be good to me. It's out of my hands now and into the oven. I'm gonna go ahead and do a little cleanup, and then we'll start on our filling. While our cake is baking, I'm gonna go ahead and make our filling so it has time to chill before I put it into the cake. And it's very simple. It's just 2 cups of heavy whipping cream. If you are a rule follower, it is 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And if you're like me, measure with your heart. And the last ingredient for the filling is 3 tablespoons of vanilla pudding mix. Now we're gonna go ahead and whip this to a soft peak, check the flavor, and if we want more vanilla, we'll add either more extract or more vanilla pudding mix. Please be baked right. Here goes nothing. I don't know if it's done. Again, I've never made this before. I'm not sure how to tell. She said the topping would be golden brown, and it's definitely golden brown, but it still looks very wet. Like, not the dough underneath. I'm pretty sure that's cooked fine. Okay, so the dough underneath it is cooked. The topping just looks wet, but I think it's because it's almost caramel based. I'm supposed to let it cool in the tin for a couple minutes. We'll come check on it at the end of those couple minutes, and if it still looks wet, we'll panic and make another one. No, we will look up ways to fix it on the internet, but I think it's just gonna kind of solidify as it cools because it's a caramel-esque topping. So we're gonna wait, let this cool. At the end of those couple minutes, we'll take it out of the pan and transfer it to a cooling rack so it can cool the rest of the way. And we're gonna do the weird slicing process, so stay tuned. Oh, also, I turned off the camera so you didn't have to listen to the mixer for 10 minutes straight, but our filling is ready. It reached stiff peaks. I did add a little extra extract and vanilla pudding mix. I just like a little bit of a stronger vanilla flavor in things, so it's ready to go whenever the cake is ready for it. You're gonna be a nightmare to cut. Okay, the topping is still a little wet, but solidifying literally every minute. I did manage to get it out of the springform pan and onto a cooling rack so that it can kind of cool fully, but I am already stressing about how in the heck I'm supposed to cut this. Like, can you guys see how thin that is? I know they want it to be thin layers, but my God, I was already not that great with a knife and making things like pretty and even. I'm stressed. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's a cake, Darby. It's just a cake. I want it to be so nice and so perfect for my granny. I know she is not going to care if it shows up crumbled at her doorstep, but I want it to be perfect. My anxiety levels are up here right now. Up here. I'm like psyching myself out so bad. Okay, just do it. Is that about halfway? I need an assistant just to cut this cake for me, please. If anyone would like to be my baking assistant, please apply in the comments. All you need to have is less anxiety about cutting a cake than I do. That's the only requirement. Maybe I try a smaller knife. This is gonna be such a bad idea, isn't it? Well, it's cut. Did it come off in one piece? Actually, yes. Does it look pretty? Absolutely not. So I will tell you, I had intended to cut it, move it to a cutting board, because the recipe, if you read the recipe I'm using, she said it's easier to cut the top layer now so that when you cut it with the cream inside, the cream doesn't just all ooze out the sides. So I was planning on taking 2 big spatulas and moving it to a cutting board. I could see it trying to fall apart, just collapse through the middle, because I think the topping is so wet on this cake that it just kind of messed with the structural integrity of that top layer. Like the bottom layer, perfect, fine, still intact, still strong, which is good. That's the silver lining. The cream is gonna go perfectly on here. This mess, I ended up having to go get our thinnest cookie sheet and slide it under the 2 layers to get it to come off in one piece. This is an act of love. I don't want it to be an act of ugliness. While the top is cooling down a little bit and I'm putting the filling in, I figured I might tell you why it is that my grandmother likes bee sting cake and was at German bakeries. So my grandfather was German, like whole family from Germany. Lived there until he was 16. So my grandmother learned to cook some German food. They would go to German bakeries. They would get German breads and lunch meats and things and just have them around. And I always thought that was really cool. And I tend to really like German food because of that. I lost my grandfather, my Opa, when I was too young. I mean, it's always too young to lose someone. But what I mean by that is I lost him when I was at an age before I could truly appreciate his culture, before I knew to ask the right questions to get all of his stories about growing up in Germany. So I'll often ask my grandmother about it. We talk about baked goods and food a lot because she's the one who taught me to bake. As much as it's an act of love for my grandmother, I kind of like to think of it as an act of love for my Opa as well. I like to think that he would be so happy to know not only that I was doing something for my granny, but to know that I was making a traditional German dessert and trying out foods from his cultures. And one of these days, I'm gonna get myself to Germany and eat all of the German foods and all of the German desserts and try all the things and see all the places. And that will be because of him, because I wanna see where he grew up and I wanna see the culture that shaped him into who he was. Cooking to me is very much an act of love for the people you're cooking for and the people you're cooking in honor of. Okay, that filling actually looks great. Now comes the stressful part where we go get the top piece, see if we can cut it, and then place it back on here. I think the woman who made this recipe is smart in saying that you should cut it first because that top would be so hard to cut through and the cream would kind of ooze out the sides. Moment of truth, we're gonna try to cut this top layer into slices. It's just so gooey, which is gonna taste immaculate. But aesthetic-wise, it worries me a little bit. We're doing it, guys. We are doing it slowly but surely. Now the transferring bit. Everybody, let's take some collective deep breaths. That's not the worst thing I've ever seen. We may need to do a little reshaping once it's on here. This is the first attempt. I keep trying to tell myself to remember that this is the first attempt. Sometimes things just need to taste good and stress you out in the process of making them. Why does it look like I don't have room for all the pieces? Oh my goodness. No, truly, it looks like I don't have room for all the pieces. How is that possible? It's the same cake. I don't understand. We're gonna make room for it. I'm not shorting her a piece of cake. Don't come for me. That's all I have to say. Do not come for me. I tried my best, okay? And my best needs to be good enough today. Alrighty, folks, and there you have it. This is what a bee sting cake looks like, at least when you make it for the first time. It may or may not look better next time. If I make it again, I will keep you updated. For now, I'm gonna go put this in the fridge to chill for about an hour, and then I'm gonna go deliver it to my granny, and I'm sure she'll invite me in for a cup of tea and a slice of this. So I'll let you know in the comments how it tasted, because hopefully I'm gonna get to try this today for the first time. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Again, the recipe will be linked in the description below, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.